The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to All You Can Eat. It's the podcast about deliciousness. I am your host, Rob Rosenthal, coming to you live on the 25th day of March 2020, episode number 76 of All You Can Eat. And I don't know. Obviously it's a very so unusual a time is it with this pandemic that it's unprecedented, literally unprecedented. It's a very kind of strange time to be alive, but frankly, better to be alive. Because the virus is a serious thing, this coronavirus, this COVID-19. It doesn't really become as serious to you until you start to know people who have it. And then unfortunately, worse than knowing people who have it is knowing people who die from it. I come to you tonight not from my usual base in New York City, New York, which has now become the epicenter of this pandemic. But I was able to escape New York City, which due to its density of population, a whole lot of people in a very small place crowded together on top of each other, you know, it's a place you don't want to be. If you can get out. I did. Coming to you live nonetheless from the eastern end of Long Island, New York, where there are fewer people. Tonight's show, we're going to talk a little bit about, food in the age of coronavirus. By which I mean that, I'm sad, frankly, because someone that I know died from the disease, and he was a chef, and not only a chef, but an extraordinary chef and a great guy and a husband and a father of two boys and a real talent who made a difference in the world of cooking. His name was Floyd Cardoz, and he died of this disease. And I will tell you that the entire kind of culinary restaurant community is in, somewhat of a state of shock. He was a 59-year-old guy. I don't believe there's any reason to think that he had some pre-existing condition, but the news was a surprise, in spite of the fact that he had posted like a week ago a picture from a hospital room with, some respirator in his nose, saying that he had come down with this thing. He was a good dude. I mean, it's sad. I don't, all you can say is that, here's what I will tell you. Long before I knew him on a personal level, I went to a restaurant in New York at the very end of the year, I believe it was. And if I had to guess, I would say right around 2008. He opened up a restaurant in New York with Danny Meyer, who is, pretty much easily the single most famous, well-known, highly regarded restaurateur in the United States of America. They opened up a restaurant downtown, Midtown, called Tabla. And I remember, even though I don't remember the specifics of the meal, because normally I'm kind of photographic memory about that kind of thing. I remember exactly what I had. Here's what I can say about that meal. It was easily the most outstanding, memorable meal that I had that entire year. That food was unbelievable. A lot of people know, Indian. I mean, if you know Indian food, you know some of the, kind of the basics. There's going to be some type of naan or aloo paratha, some type of bread. They have beautiful, rice dishes. Everybody knows about their tandoori chicken and their, and vindaloo and jalfrezi and what, and these are kind of like the very basics of Indian cuisine. Floyd was way beyond that. Way, way beyond that. This was unbelievable food that he was preparing at a super high level. 3 stars in the New York Times. I mean, that's no Indian restaurant ever had achieved that before. The meal was unbelievable. And memorable and just outstanding. Somewhere along the way, I was introduced to Floyd and ended up, spending enough time with him that we were able to, laugh together. I would interview him. I have a lovely, 9 or 10 minute video program that I had done with him in the kitchen of the daily meal. It's kind of, I'm glad that there's a history of it, because what it shows is that he was so bright, like intelligent, and so lovely kind of a guy, and so talented as a chef. And it was funny because the way that it worked, I was doing a program, it was called Rob Rosenthal Hot Lunch. It was in the studio of the Daily Meal. And the way it worked is that I would ask, I say, hey, you want to come in and do a lunch with me? Sure. And I said, what ingredients should I pick up? And he basically handed me, I think, some spices and whatever, Indian spices, and said, whatever else you get is fine with me. And for a reason that I still can't explain to this day, I literally came back to the kitchen with eggs and chicken livers. And I know that this sounds weird because, you don't necessarily associate these things with Indian cuisine. And yet, there we were in the kitchen. We spent a couple of minutes talking about Indian food. Floyd was from Mumbai, used to be called Bombay. And the food was Goan. And the thing about the Goan cuisine is that they ate, everything. You know what I mean? They weren't limited to like a particular veg or whatever. Their palate was fairly broad because it was influenced by the Portuguese. So we hung out in the kitchen, and I whip out some eggs and some chicken livers, and it's no problem because we have all the spices that he told me to get. So we made some omelet, which had all of the there was onions and there were peppers in the thing, and then some of the Indian spices, and then we did the chicken livers, and it was just outstanding. And I'm just so glad that that's on record, because you could see from that time that we spent together how thoughtful he was and how proud he was of the cuisine. And beyond that, he was super influential in the New York restaurant community. Tabla was unlike any restaurant ever before. It expanded people's palates. It expanded people's idea of Indian food. He trained just a ton of chefs that went on to become super successful in their own venues, doing their own type of cuisine. But he was an innovator. He was a pioneer, and he was a lovely guy. 59 years old, 2 boys and a wife. Gone. Coronavirus. The New York restaurant community is super saddened, so you can go on to Eater, ny.eater.com, and see all the people that are hurt and who had words of tribute, including Danny Meyer himself, who said few people have done more than Floyd to impact an entire industry. The career trajectories of more cooks, or the palates of more restaurant goers. He was beyond talented as a cook. I should mention, by the way, that he won Top Chef Masters in season 3, just as an aside. He was competing against some of the best chefs in the country. He won. Danny goes on, he was a super taster, big-hearted, stubborn as the day is long, and the most loyal friend, husband, and dad you could imagine. My heart is just broken. His life and career was full of triumph and adversity. We opened and closed 2 restaurants together, and in that time he never once lost his sense of love for those he'd worked with, mentored, and mattered to. He made monumental contributions to our industry and to my organization, and his passing leaves us with a gaping hole. Chef Floyd Cardoz, dead from COVID-19 at the age of 59. I am going to tell you that if you have any interest whatsoever, that video that I referenced where we hung out in the kitchen over lunch, cooked together, he was funny. We were doing this omelet in this like super big heavy pan, and he goes, "Oh, go ahead and flip it over." And you know, I mean, the chances of failure were like 92%. I mean, flipping over an omelet with like a half a dozen eggs in it in a super heavy pan, but he wanted me to do it. I did. It was fine. The food was fantastic. He was a treat to be with, and easily, as I said in that video, certainly the greatest Indian chef, I think, in our country, if not beyond that. If you wanted to see that video, how would you see that? Well, here's how. You could, let's see, the Daily Mail. Yeah, you could, I suppose you could go to the dailymeal.com and check out, like do a search for Indian Chef Floyd Cardoz. That's one way to look at it. Or if you wanted to, I think I posted today on Twitter a link to that video, and on Twitter I am Short Order Dad. That video is findable if you want to see it. But there it is, just a with a heavy heart. You don't, I think, begin to fully appreciate the impact of the crisis that we are confronted with until you start to know people who are sick from it or die. Now, he wasn't the first. My sister-in-law has had this thing for 2 weeks. Worst illness that she's ever had. Still, 2 weeks later, after having been to emergency rooms and taken medicine for it and whatever else, still not, feel better, but exhausted. I mean, I don't have to tell you, it's brutal. What I can tell you is that you can't even imagine how careful you have to be. By which I mean being out with other people is just bad. It's just too easy to this thing, a virus is just too easy to transfer. If you can avoid people, if you can avoid humanity, if you can avoid touching things and then touching yourself, I suppose that's always a challenge, then you should. You don't really want to be out there. And by the way, that's the thing I think that was surprising to me. I mean, it's one thing that if you go out, you're distant from other people. I get that. But here's the thing. I wondered, as a food guy, what happens when you buy something that has been stocked, the shelves? I went over to the Costco, right? Not a lot of people in there when I went, but the point of the story is that, everything that somebody touches, this virus lives on. What happens with food that somebody makes, and then you order it as a take-in? Hey, that pizza that comes in that cardboard box that you're delivering to me, is that safe? No, is the answer. No. The short answer is, you can't believe how easy it is to get this thing. I refer you to a video on YouTube, which he loaded, let's see, loaded March 24th. That's yesterday, man. That's, you got 600,000 views on a video that this Dr. Jeffrey Van Wingen, MD, uploaded yesterday. he does 13 minutes on how you need to basically clean, sterilize, sanitize the food that you're bringing in from outside the home. If you don't take this thing seriously, it's going to get you. The guy brings in supermarket packages and starts sterilizing every single one. He brings in takeout food and sterilizes anything that anybody else could have touched. So you may want to check out this video. It's worth the 13-minute. If I told you that you had a choice of getting really super ill, super ill, or watching a 13-minute YouTube video on how to sanitize the food that you're bringing into your house from supermarkets, grocery stores, takeout places, I would spend the 13 minutes. Here you go. Look up this. PSA, public service announcement, safe grocery shopping in COVID-19 pandemic. YouTube, PSA, safe grocery shopping in COVID-19 pandemic. Updated. 580,000 views at this point. Dr. Jeffrey Van Wingen. I mean, long story short, man, this is a doctor from somewhere out there in the middle of the country, I want to say somewhere in Michigan, showing you how to sterilize what's coming into your house, because apparently the virus can last on materials for some time. On some materials more than others. Maybe, 2 days on cardboard or a day on metal and 17 freaking days on a ship. You don't take it seriously, there's going to be a problem. I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news. This is just the reality. Go onto your YouTube and check out PSA Safe Grocery Shopping in COVID-19 Pandemic. Dr. Jeffrey Van Wingen. Thank you, doctor, because, wow. I thought I was careful. Floyd, gone, said, Dr. Van Wingen will show you on YouTube how to sterilize stuff coming into the house. I don't know, again, I reported last time we came here together, and I like to go live if I can. In fact, I always produce live. That's why, there will be errors and mistakes and omissions and that kind of thing, but I don't, whatever. It's this is how it works. But I was live 2 weeks ago on all the things you might want to stock in your own home when it comes to, having to be locked in for a couple of weeks. The stuff you want to have in the pantry, the stuff you want to keep in the fridge, and all that kind of thing. You can find that episode, and any episode, frankly, of All You Can Eat if you go to iHeartRadio podcasts and you do a search for Rob Rosenthal or All You Can Eat. You can find all of the podcasts, which is to say 75 of them so far, over on the Spotify also, looking into, searching in the podcast for All You Can Eat. But I'm here with you now, and I'm going to take a sip of Kentucky bourbon. Not my first sip, by the way. I've been sipping for a while. Waiting for the show to start. Sipping away. And if you're going to have bourbon, by the way, it's going to be from Kentucky. How many places can you say that about? I suppose you could say, tequila should be coming from Mexico. But that's a whole country, right? There's probably 7 different parts of Mexico where tequila come from. 7 different states, if you will. But there's only one state in not only the United States, but in the world that produces, well, the best possible bourbon that you can get. There's probably other places in the world. You could probably find bourbon being made in Brooklyn, and it may be good, by the way. I think there is a very good bourbon that's coming out of Brooklyn. I forget the name, but Having been on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, I can tell you, if you're going to have bourbon, the bourbon coming out of Kentucky is the real deal. I mean, that's just it. That's just like, that is, well, I don't know if ground zero is the right term to use these days, but that's where you want your bourbon to come from. And I spent a good part of my life not drinking bourbon only because it was brown, and I wasn't drinking the brown. I had a bad thing in school with too much brown. I think it was, what was it, that rusty nail? Man, that was just freaking brutal. Spent the night sleeping on the toilet. And but anyway, all of a sudden, I go to Kentucky some years ago and had the bourbon, and I thought, you know what, I could do this. And right now, I'm drinking it, as they would say, neat. There's no ice cube, there's no mixer, there's no nothing in here. But you could also do some things with bourbon that really make it go down easy. Anyway, speaking of bourbon, I was concerned in the isolation, in the quarantine. And if you haven't had your own quarantini, go ahead and make one. That's whatever you're going to be drinking. I was concerned not so much with the groceries and with the pantries. I felt like we were pretty good on the grocery and on the pantries, but I started to look at the liquor cabinet and the wine supply, and I'm going back now a week. I'm 8 days into this thing. And it doesn't look good. I mean, I changed studios, so now I'm stuck having to look in a mirror at myself, and this quarantine thing is going to hurt me. But anyway, I digress, because I'm talking about the fact that I thought that I had enough food. I was not sure that I had enough alcohol for this thing. And so, before everybody was kind of locked down, drove over to the local liquor store. And arrived there, honestly, at 2 minutes before 7, to the point where the two guys that were working there said to me, I'm going back, this is 8 days ago. There's nobody in that place at that hour, and that's fine, it was closing time. They said to me, hey, you got 2 minutes. And in that 2 minutes, I was able to pick up 24 bottles of wine, which earned me a 15% discount. And in a week or so, worth of wine. Right. So that's that situation. Now, speaking of which, and I know I'm going to jump around here, but everything you'll see that we discussed tonight is connected. Because right now I'm going to tell you that if you wanted to get wine, you wouldn't really have to leave your home, because you would go to one of two services, one called Vinebox, Vinebox, and another called Usual Wines. Now, I'm going to hit the link right now for Vinebox. We can do this together, which I like. Okay, Vinebox. Right. Vinebox, getvinebox.com. New wines every season, join now. I don't know, so this one appears to me to be like you kind of have to join, but that's one option that you have. And the other is called Usual Wines. Let's see what that one looks like. Now, Usual Wines, glass wine bottle shop. Yeah, so on usualwines.com, I think you can pretty much go in there, pick the wines that you want, and have them delivered. And now remember what I told you just a few minutes ago, which is when that stuff gets delivered, the wine has been handled, the bottles have been handled, the box, the cardboard box that it comes in has been touched. Just consider that. And I'm not, this is not about panic. This is just about being smart. More importantly, this is about getting wine into your home. So that's how you might get some wine. You don't have to leave the house these days to get yourself a delivery of wine. And then, frankly, I'm sure most of your local grocery stores have remained open as a vital service to the community, whether or not you have to go there and pick it up yourself, or whether or not you can get it delivered. But, you can certainly go online these days and have wine delivered. So just a little public service from me. Here's another subject, which is, tonight, I had seen a recipe. So this is like, what are you going to do at home, for a week or two if you can't leave? And you're not even really a cook. I hadn't really considered that, because I just kind of assumed most people can throw some stuff together, but that's really unfair. A lot of people can't. So here's what I'm going to offer you up. I can help you, right? It's not only about telling you what to have. It's more like, let me tell you how it is that you might be able to use it. And so I quote a recipe today in the New York Times, and I think you can probably look it up. It's called Any Vegetable Soup. And the concept of making a soup is, I'm going to take you through basically how to make a soup, but I was intrigued just because it was like, what, wait, any vegetable soup? So basically the deal is that if you have 1 hour, you can make a soup, and if you make enough of it, it's going to last you for a while. I mean, I made a pot of soup with the vegetables that I had here in the house, and I got so much soup, I mean, I got, it's going to be lasting for a while. I mean, half of it or two-thirds of it is going into the freezer. But the idea is that you can make it with pretty much any vegetables that you have. And while it would be lovely if you had some chicken stock on hand or some vegetable stock, you don't even need it because this can be done with water. Although I do like, the idea of giving it a little extra flavor. But, I mean, vegetarians are not going to use chicken stock anyway. They would use vegetable stock. And you know what you make vegetable stock from? Vegetables. And while it would be great if you had some, fresh, herbs in the house, some rosemary or some thyme or whatever it is, it's also not crucial to the recipe. You can do it without. It would help. However, if you had some celery on hand, maybe there was an onion around, some carrots, these are good things. So I mentioned this because if you want to make a pot of soup, you take some, you chop up some, maybe some celery and some onion, maybe some garlic. You got that? You got some carrot? And you throw that into a pot where you've melted maybe a little bit of butter or olive oil or some combination. I like the combination of olive oil and butter. And you see a little bit of sizzle in there, and then you throw in some of your veg that I'm talking about here, a little carrot, a little celery, a little onion, a little garlic. That's the base. That's the base for flavor. Right? And so you cook that around a little bit for a couple of minutes, and it smells good, and the onions start to get a little bit translucent, and they get a little bit of soft, and then you throw in whatever vegetables you have. Now, I happen to have had on hand some mushrooms. I happen to have had some broccoli. I had a thing of frozen peas. I had a sweet potato. I don't remember. They might have even been whatever vegetable you have goes into that pot, and then you add in your either your stock or your water, or in my case, I like both. Again, I put in a box of chicken broth. I put in a equal amount of water just to cover all the veg, and you bring that thing up to a boil with a bunch of salt and some pepper. And then once it hits the boil, you put it down on a simmer for 45 minutes, and you got yourself some lovely chicken soup. I mean, some soup, vegetable soup. Now, the reason I even slipped and said chicken is because I happen to have had some chicken in the house. And my feeling was that if I cut up a little chicken on the bone, and if you know me, I always have some thighs around, and I throw in even a couple of slices of chicken breast in when I'm, sauteing up all the carrot and the celery and the onion and the garlic, it just brings more flavor to the thing. And then all your veg go in, and all your liquid goes in, and all your boil, and then down to a simmer, and then the cover goes on, and then 45 minutes later, I tell you what, you taste and you go, hey, maybe it needs a little more salt, or maybe it needs some pepper. Maybe when you serve it, in fact, you give it a squeeze of lemon, or maybe you drop in a little bit of olive oil, or maybe you have some fresh herb on hand that you want to put on top of it, like a piece of basil or parsley or cilantro, whatever you like. Or maybe you go, hey, you know what would make this thing interesting if I grated a little cheese into the thing? Whatever greens you have, whatever veg you have, whatever potato you want to throw in there, you got some chicken. It's not complicated cooking. That's the point I'm trying to make. Concept is that you saute up some veg to create a little flavor base, and then everything else goes in on top of it, and it is delicious. Now, as we segue into the next subject, it's from an article that's written by a guy named Mark Bittman, who has been, I think he's written 30 cookbooks, and he used to write for the New York Times, and Bittman knows food. He just does. He's a master at this thing. And speaking of master, I found an article that he wrote today. It's called Mark Bittman's Master List of Interchangeable Ingredients. And this is important, by the way, whether you're kind of a talented kind of chef or someone with no experience. People look at recipes and they go, well, I don't have those ingredients. I wonder if there's something that I could do to, substitute. And basically the concept behind Bittman's article is a simple one. It's like, yeah, you can, and now let me tell you what you can substitute with, right? So at this time when you're home and you're hanging out there for weeks, whether or not you're a cook, you know that you have some stuff in the pantry and you know that there's other things that you don't have, but you never have to be intimidated by looking at a recipe and going, I can't make it because I don't have X. And the reason is because you can substitute with Y. So you ready? So like here's an example. If you look at the stuff that's in the pantry and in the refrigerator, the kind of stuff that's like staples, if a recipe calls for stock, then you can use water. You could use wine. And you could use beer. Like liquid is important. Depending on the recipe, these are all kind of interchangeable. I'm not saying that I would have used wine or beer for my vegetable soup, but certainly water instead of chicken stock. And that's the point here. You can use something, if the recipe calls for stock, there are other liquid options that you can use. Anytime a recipe calls for nuts or certain dried fruit, his answer is any nut or dried fruit can be substituted for any other, right? So your thing is calling for hazelnuts, but all you have is almonds, good, go. Your thing wants peanuts and all you got is pistachio, fine, no problem. Your thing is, your recipe is calling for dried cherries, but you don't. You have raisins or dried cranberries, go. That's the point. Vinegar. Recipe calls for vinegar. Recipe calls more specifically for white wine vinegar, apple vinegar, balsamic vinegar, any kind of vinegar, and here's the answer. Any other kind of vinegar will work. That's what the point is. And you know what else works? Completely underappreciated, but sometimes it works better, is your citrus fruits. Lemon or lime juice work. I think it's one of the most important things to have in your home is lemons, because it's amazing how simple and versatile they are, especially when it comes to something important, which in the chef world is called kind of brightening up the food. You know what I mean? You can grill a chicken breast, and you can give it olive oil and butter, and you can give it seasoning salt and garlic salt and onion salt, but I'll tell you what, a little squeeze of lemon at the end is beautiful on that thing. When a recipe calls for fish sauce, you don't have fish sauce. Let's face it, you just don't. So you use soy sauce. When a recipe calls for dried or fresh red chilies, and you don't have dried or fresh red chilies, you have chili flakes in the house, you have cayenne pepper, those will serve the purpose. When a recipe calls for cooked or canned beans, either one, they are interchangeable. I'm not telling you that I never cook with beans, but I always think of dried beans as requiring kind of more labor that I'm willing to put in, because they have to be soaked and rinsed and cleaned. Why don't I just open up a freaking can? And I've said it before, I will say it again, that when I do the Costco, because I am the Costco home, I buy those chickpeas. I think they sell 8 cans at a time. I open up the lid. They even make that easy. You don't need you need your own kind of can opener, because it comes with like a pull top. I strain off all the gushy juice that they are soaked in, and those chickpeas I throw in the toaster oven with whatever my favorite spice is. I like that Trader Joe chili lime, but you can use cumin, you can use red pepper, you can use ancho, you can use smoked paprika, whatever your favorite flavor is. You hit up your chickpeas, you put them in the toaster oven for 7 minutes, and boom, baby, they're delicious. And the point is that anytime you have any beans in a recipe, they're interchangeable. You can the cooked or the canned for each other. A recipe calls for sour cream, you can use yogurt. A recipe calls for heavy cream, you can use half and half, or you could probably use, well, he says you can use half and half unless you're whipping. Like when it comes to whipping it, whip it good, you have to use heavy cream. That's the only thing that'll become whipped cream. When a recipe calls for canned or jarred tuna, he says, go ahead and substitute in dried canned sardines. Let's talk about herbs. A recipe calls for cilantro. You can use parsley or basil. I make that exchange a lot. When a recipe calls for tarragon, there's dill, there's mint, there's chives, there's chervil. All good choices. If it asks for rosemary, you know that you have thyme and sage and oregano. Completely exchangeable, perfectly good. Recipe calls for shallots, you can use onions or you can use leeks. As for lemongrass, you can use lemon or lime zest. Then he moves into, how you can substitute different meats and poultries and seafood. So this is super helpful just in general for anybody that kind of cooks at all, to know that you can substitute. Recipe calls for ground beef. You can use ground pork, lamb, chicken, turkey, or duck. In meat for a stir fry, you can use flank or sirloin steak. You can use pork shoulder, pork leg, or loin, lamb shoulder, boneless chicken, especially the thighs, really good in a stir fry. Recipe has meat for a stew, boneless beef chuck or round, cubed beef brisket, pork shoulder or fresh ham, which is from the pork leg of lamb, lamb shoulder. When a recipe calls for pork chops, use bone-in chicken thighs. Or pork medallions that are cut from the tenderloin. When a recipe says, I want boneless, skinless chicken breasts, you're going to go boneless chicken thighs. Even though they may take a little bit longer. Or you may go with pork chops. And you may go with turkey or veal cutlets. So, salmon, you can substitute trout. Cod, you can use halibut. Snapper, you can use catfish. Shrimp, you can use scallops or squid. Mussels, you can use clams. And then he goes into, it's a lot here, but here's the point. I'm going to go quickly through it because he goes by season how you can substitute produce, right? In the winter, beets can be substituted with turnips. Cauliflower can be substituted with broccoli or broccoli raw. Brussels sprouts and cabbage. Fennel can be done with celery. Oranges can be substituted with grapefruit or clementines or tangerines. And then any of the greens that you use are all interchangeable, whether they're kale or shallot or escarole, mustard greens, beet greens, bok choy, blah, 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 blah. Again, with the leeks, you can use onions, shallots, or scallions, all good. Jicama, if you use, can be replaced with radishes, especially daikon. Pineapple can be replaced with oranges, and this thing goes on. It's extensive because that's how he works by season, literally telling you what you can use if you don't have a thing on the if you don't have a specific ingredient on your list. Recipe replacements are easy. You can look up Mark Bittman's master list of interchangeable ingredients. Oh, how to cook beans. I can't even. If you want to know how to cook beans, that you can look up too. I'm not a big bean cooker. I mentioned that. I don't think it's complicated. I just don't have the time. I don't have the patience. I'm perfectly happy opening up a can. In fact, just a couple of days ago, in going through the pantry, I see that I have some Trader Joe's beans. What kind of beans were they? They were so good. They were like a black bean, chili thing. Perfectly good. You don't have to drain. You don't have to do anything. Literally poured it into a thing, heated it up. No problem. I like. But if you want to know how to cook beans, go How to Cook Beans, New York Times Cooking, video and article by Melissa Clark, period. Next up, and I feel like I have talked about this. I certainly talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Hang on, it's time for a little bourbon here. My old Kentucky home. The last show, I spent some time talking about spices because I really feel that they're underused, underappreciated. And I think really, speaking about Floyd, one of the chefs that he had worked for in the old days called him the spicy man. He didn't mind that designation, but the point is, one of the things that Floyd understood was the importance of spices and spice mixes and spice blends, especially prevalent in the cooking of India. But what what I'm here to tell you is that as a guy whose essential formula has always been getting the most taste with the fewest ingredients and the least effort, I will assure you that the easiest way to do that is with spices. It just is. Example, those chickpeas I mentioned before. Hit up with nothing more than that Trader Joe's chili lime spice. Toaster oven, 7 minutes. Beautiful. Your chickpeas, hit up with ancho chili powder and a pinch of salt. Lovely. Smoked Spanish paprika, otherwise known as pimentón, to give your food a smoky flavor. And whether I'm talking about chickpeas, or whether I'm talking about chicken thighs, or whether I'm talking about salad dressings, or you just add one pinch of a spice blend to a dish, and all of a sudden you've completely changed its meaning, its profile. Especially when I'm talking about spice blends, of which there are hundreds. Not just the obvious ones that you know about and you might see in the supermarket, but, you know, the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, the Ethiopian, the Moroccan. And so you can go online to Amazon, as an example, and get some spices delivered to your home. You can go online to Penzeys, Penzeys, a terrific spice company. You can go online and shop for the more kind of, I'm going to say exotic, but there's an operation in New York known as Kalustyan, K-A-L, probably Y-U-S-T-I-A-N, Kalustyans. I mean, they've got hundreds and hundreds of spices and spice blends from around the world, and you click a couple of buttons, and next thing you know, they're sending it to your house. And then, of course, you have the Spice House, which I just started using recently, and they were kind enough to offer me and you for listening a discount code. And trust me, I don't get a penny from this. I'm just telling you so that you know that if, for example, you wanted to get yourself some, Jamaican jerk, and that's got to have a whole bunch of dried ingredients in it, right? But if you ever wanted to make jerk chicken wings, man, all you have to do is go order some jerk spices, right? Or suppose you wanted to do some, make something that was Turkish, or suppose you wanted to do something like Floyd made with curries. You know how many different kind of curries curry powders and curries there are? There are thousands. You don't have to be a genius, right? It's easy to find kind of recipes. It's easy to figure out, how much you need to use. Anyway, the spicehouse.com, I think what I like about it is that they kind of divide everything up on that website, so that they make it kind of like you can order by region, you can order by, whether you're going to be, looking for a blend or a single spice. You can order if you're, whether you're looking for, a certain occasion. Do I want to grill stuff? Do I want to, whatever. I mean, the website is laid out really nicely, and they package the stuff really well, and they'll send it to your house, and the next thing you know, because you're now home for, 10 days, you hate yourself, you hate everything you're making, but all of a sudden a couple of these things end up in the mail, and you throw it into your food, and you go, well, at least that's good. At least that's good. At least I throw some of that jerk chicken spice on that chicken before I throw it in the oven, or I throw some of that, Bavarian blend onto the fish before I give it a quick saute, or I throw some of those Mexican spices on the shrimp there with the little olive oil and garlic before I give that a quick saute, and life is good. If you go to the Spice House and you order some stuff, and you want to save yourself 15%, use All You Can Eat, which is the name of this program. But use All You Can Eat as the discount code, and you'll get 15% off what you get over there. Turkish, Thailandish, blah, blah, blah. Let's see, Spice House. Yeah, sure. Cajun spices, smoky spices, curries, hot and spicy, North Africa, Middle East, chili, etc., etc., etc. Let's see, what else is happening here in the world? Oh, yeah, here's another one for you, by the way. We talked about that vegetable soup. I'm going to give you something else, too, which is this, because, one of those staples that you have at home in the fridge, not the fridge, but in the cabinet there, in the pantry, is you may have some pasta. And a lot of people these days are doing, what do they call those spirals? Like when you spiral the zucchini and all that. Whatever you use, pasta. It could be the spiral zucchini. It could be rice that you want to make, or any other kind of starchy thing. Tomato sauce. But what I want to say about tomato sauce is I haven't purchased tomato sauce in 15 years. And the reason why is simply because it is always better to make your own. And it's not hard. So let me just walk you through this, because you're saying to yourself, well, I don't know if I can do that. I'm asking you to do this. Chop up a little bit of garlic. What's a little bit? Depends how much garlic you like. I mean, I'm fine with 3 or 4 cloves. And you've now done the hard work of making your own tomato sauce. Well, the other hard work is actually having a can of tomatoes. Canned tomatoes. And if you have the opportunity to get Italian plum tomatoes, good. And you happen to have that they come from a district in Italy called San Marzano, lovely, but not, not the be-all, end-all, lovely if you can. But at the end of the day, you take a can of whole plum tomatoes, if you can, and, throw them in the blender for a minute. Your olive oil, a tablespoon or so, goes into a pan. That garlic that you chopped up, I like sliced versus chopped because you have less chance of kind of burning it. But the olive oil is going to go into that pan there. And then the garlic goes into the pan. You cook for 30 seconds and it starts to look, the color starts to look a little bit, kind of almost like an almond, like a little toasty, and it smells good, right? And just when you get to that point, you dump in those tomatoes. That whole can of crushed up tomatoes goes in there. And the most important ingredient right now is going to be salt. I did neglect to mention that if you want to give this thing just a little bit of a hit, a little bit more of a flavor, while the garlic is cooking, throw in a pinch of your red pepper flakes. Lovely. Lovely. You like it super spicy, you'll throw in more. You like just, I don't even want to know that it's spicy, but it gives more flavor. You'll just put in a pinch. Your tomatoes go in, your salt goes in, you give it a stir. And now, you could just leave it be for a while. Maybe you have some tomato paste on hand, maybe you don't. I have cheated. Please don't tell my family, but at this point, I mean, even a tablespoon of ketchup is not bad, because ketchup is bringing you just a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of saltiness. It's fine. A tablespoon, not more. And you let that stuff simmer right there for, let's call it 15, 20 tops. Stir it around. And now you have homemade tomato sauce. And I promise you that it's going to be better than 99.9% of the things that you can get out of opening up a jar. And you've made it. And it's good. And you can put it on top of anything. Anything meaning pasta, rice, those spiraled zucchini noodles, roasted vegetables, make your own pizza. I remember as a kid we used to do that all the time. Took a little tomato sauce, put it on an English muffin, right? And on top of that, some cheese, and you make your own pizza little things. So there you have it. Let us spend the remaining time that we have just to review what's what. Number one, we're in the middle of a crisis here. Take it seriously. Wash everything. Stay away from humanity. Number two, you're going to cook at home. And, you want to make it tasty. You want to make it fun. It wouldn't hurt to have some interesting spices and herbs and that kind of thing. I've given you a couple of recipes here to think about, making your own tomato sauce or making your own veggie soup or that kind of thing. Lovely. Don't worry about recipes being precise, as we've spent plenty of time tonight. Most everything is replaceable. I wrote a cookbook, and it makes me somewhat sad to think about it, because Floyd Cardoz himself wrote a review of the cookbook, which was so nice, but the thing that struck me about it was that you could tell in his writing of it, he actually read the book. Sometimes people give you a review and they say lovely things, but you're not positive that they read the book. You could tell that he read the book. Anyway, where was I going with that? Oh, right. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. I forget exactly where I was going. I wrote a book. You can get it if you want. It's actually a good thing to get now. Again, I ain't getting rich off the 20 cents that they're giving me if you buy a copy of this thing. If I even get that, I don't even know anymore. All You Can Eat. No, that's the name of my podcast. The book is actually Short Order Dad, One Guy's Guide to Making Food Fun and Hassle-Free. And you can get the book. You can get that on Amazon or wherever else they sell books. I think, that's what I wanted to tell you. There's not a lot of copies left up there. Sometimes I go over to Amazon, take a check. Like today, there was there's one copy left, but it's not a lot of money. I think it's like $7, $8. Short Order Dad, and a ton of recipes in there, and they're all easy. You'll have the recipe in there for the tomato sauce. You'll have 90 other things, including a couple of cocktail recipes, which God knows is important at this time of stress. The other reason I am mentioning all of this is as we get to the end here. Oh, right, because I was talking about replaceable ingredients. Yeah, when you look at a recipe, pretty much everything is replaceable. There's no magic to a recipe other than to understand the concept behind it, and then realize that that's where I was going. Realize that you can essentially, improv. I called it in the book intuitive cooking. It meant that if you understood kind of the basic idea behind how you prepare something, you could always kind of adjust or accommodate or innovate in your own way based on what it was that you have. So that's one thing. Short Order Dad, the book. The other thing I can tell you is that if you want help in any way, I'm kind of easy to reach. If you go over to the Instagram, it's the one place that I kind of use my own name. It's Real Rob Rosenthal. I put up a couple of videos this week just of what I've been cooking here in hibernation. I did an avocado toast, which is not complicated, but I make it kind of interesting by putting red pepper flakes and pistachio on it. I do another version with prosciutto, lovely. I did a dish this week where I combined Italian sausage with clams. Now, I happen to have had this stuff on hand. Not everybody does, but boy, when society reopens, get yourself some Italian sausage and clams, man, and then find me. Find me, and I will talk you through it. I will tell you how to make a dish that's amazing and delicious and easy. My cooking isn't complicated. You don't have to go to cooking school like I did. I went so that you don't have to go. I can tell you what it is that you need to know. So if you go to Instagram, you're one of those people. I'm Real Rob Rosenthal. If you're a Twitter person, you can find me there at Short Order Dad. If you're a Facebook person, again, you can find me at Short Order Dad. And if you need me, you can kind of almost get me directly. shortorderdad@gmail.com. How easy is that? My boy Jimmy is up there up in the New Hampshire zone. Hope you're staying safe up there, Jimmy. I'm glad we had this time together, everybody. I'm going to be pulling out now because it's time for me to finish the Kentucky bourbon and move back into the kitchen, where I proceed to gain the Pandemic 15. Oh, it's the Pandemic 19. That's what it is. They call it the COVID-19. It's exactly how much weight it seems I'm going to gain at the end of this national nightmare. Hey, Jimmy, you up? Well, I'm sure he's going to be up when he discovers that I have left the building. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode number 76 of All You Can Eat. It's the podcast about deliciousness. I'm your host, Rob Rosenthal, coming to you live tonight on the 25th day of March in the year of 2020, and I am here to tell you, as I do every single week, two things. Number one, that I'll be back next week at this time, 8 o'clock. We go live on Wednesday nights. And then by the following day, you can find me over on the iHeartRadio and Spotify podcasts. Look for All You Can Eat or Rob Rosenthal. And the second thing I say is keep safe out there. Wash your hands, stay away from people, sterilize everything. And remember, life is short, so never waste a meal. See you next time.
I'm the Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon